Hi, my name's Clay Marcoux, and this is my rough draft presentation on Noah's flood. So, you've already been taught everything you need to know to figure out for yourself what I'm about to say. It's going to seem strange when you start to realize the theory that you subscribe to is false and that the true story was actually taught to you in Sunday school. So, one of the most important things to understanding how the flood happened is understanding that the water came from underneath the earth. And this is my map of the planet, if you can't tell. Here's North America, South America, Africa, and Europe. And as I said, the water came from underneath the ground. And if you'll look on the ocean floor, you can see where the water broke forth and separated the continents. Because originally we had a supercontinent called Pangaea. And on Pangaea there was a mountain range called the Central Pangaean Mountains. And those mountains today are known as the Appalachian Mountains, the Atlas Mountains, the Highland Mountains, and the Ouachita Mountains. Those used to be one mountain range and have since had the tops of them blown off by the tidal waves that erupted from underneath the ground and pushed the continents in the directions they're going at a high rate of speed. You can see this line that I'm talking about. It's called the high seismicity region, and it runs all along the planet, goes around the back, and the shape perfectly mirrors the continents. And you'll see the continents also mirror each other, but the scar underneath the ocean mirrors even better than the continents themselves do. You can see it running along and how it split Pangaea. It is obvious that's what happened to cause the continents we have today to separate from their original supercontinent. So, as this water was blasting everything away and tidal waves were washing over the continents, the dinosaurs attempted to escape to freedom. And they retreated to the high points of the world. And if you look at a map of North America and the dinosaur graveyards that we find, you will see that most of the dinosaurs either retreated to Colorado and Utah, Alaska, and in a few cases, Pennsylvania, because those are the high points on the continent. And in these graveyards, you will find only adult dinosaurs and no young dinosaurs. So, the dinosaurs themselves are a huge blocker to anyone trying to understand the biblical view of how the world was made. Because if dinosaurs are in the ground, well, for a lot of people, that's a big reason as to why the Bible is false. Because where did the dinosaurs come from? Well, in 1991, a Tyrannosaurus rex was discovered to have blood and soft tissue in the bones. The fossilized bones had blood and soft tissue in them. And since 1991, it has become accepted that most dinosaur fossils have blood and soft tissue in them. So it turns out maybe they weren't around very long ago. Maybe they do fit into the biblical worldview. Furthermore, as the fossil record was being formed by these tidal waves, the forests and all other living creatures were covered up by the ground and also fossilized into coal and oil. And if you test this coal and oil with a carbon-14 test, you will find out that it tests young. Just like the dinosaurs with soft tissue and blood cells inside, coal and oil tests young for carbon-14, which indicates that it's young, as if it was at least 1.5 million years old, there would be no carbon-14, yet we find plenty of it. As the coal and the oil and the dinosaurs were being buried, the water was moving on the planet and it covered up the entire planet. The continents began to stop where they were, and as they couldn't go any further, you will see on the edges of the continents the mountain ranges formed. Because as the continents tried to move forward and they could not, the ground, instead of continuing to move, it rose. It rose up, and on the edges of the continents, you can see the mountain ranges. Right where they buckled on the plates. And with the water totally covering the planet, the layers of the ground were sorted, because water naturally sorts sediments. You can do a very simple science experiment with a 2-liter water, sand, rocks, soil, and put it in a 2-liter with water, shake it up, swirl it around, and it will all settle into layers. You will have perfect little layers like a cake. And when you look at the geologic column, that's exactly what you find. You find perfect layers in the ground, undisturbed by plants or animals. These were laid out by water. It is quite obvious. As these layers were being laid out by the water, some of them, instead of just forming straight lines, folded on each other because, they were wet and movable. So scientists like to attribute this to heat and say that the folding occurred because it was down low where it was real hot, and this turned the ground into kind of like plastic, and it allowed it to form folds that did not break, which would be called faulting otherwise. But one of the problems with this is that in the Grand Canyon, at a very high level, you will find some of the most incredible folding that has occurred in the geologic record. This is really high up, and scientists can't explain how it occurred there. Well, I can tell you it occurred because the water was moving on the surface of the ground, and it was not heat, but water that allowed the folding to occur. And that's why we find the upheaval dome in the Grand Canyon. So, it's not only that, but the geologic column has missing rocks that should not be there that scientists can't explain, but I'm pretty sure that my flood theory does a much better job than the normal geologic theory does. So moving forward, as the water completely covered the earth, it began to rain because the water heated up. You may have heard that water gets hot when there's a lot of it. Well, it did. It got lukewarm, and this caused a lot of evaporation. And the evaporation caused it to rain for the first time. And this rain on the poles froze. And it froze into the ice caps we have today, except during the flood, the Arctic and the polar regions were increased in their size, and this caused the Ice Age to begin because the Arctic and the polar regions were bigger, and when it rained, it froze in larger areas that the Ice Age accounts for. And these ice caps are still melting today. You know, people talk about climate change. People don't ever ask, how did the ice caps get there in the first place? How did those freshwater ice cubes just happen to float in the saltwater ocean? Well, like I say, it was always cold up there, and when it started to rain for the first time, the water froze, and that's what created the ice caps. So the Ice Age was shorter than most people imagine, and it started to melt immediately. And furthermore, it wasn't just one wave of ice. There's a lot of evidence that this Ice Age was receding and coming back and melting again and then freezing again. And this would explain why there's elephants that are frozen in the ice with tropical food in their stomach. So, let me change my map right here.